German herpetologist Mark Oliver Rödel has been slogging through the primeval forests of Cameroon for several hours now. He's looking for rare frogs, but so far today he hasn't had much success.
We have found a few species that are common to the area, and they're doing well here. But many others just can't be found here anymore.
There are an estimated 7,000 species of amphibians, and about 1/3 of them are considered endangered. Amphibians are particularly vulnerable to pollutants in their environment because they have very thin skin that allows them to absorb oxygen and water. Species of frogs are dying out around the world, and scientists are trying to figure out why. Can it be that man-made changes in the environment are to blame? It's the rainy season here in southwest Cameroon. This is Mount Manengouba, a long, dormant volcano. The rainforest on its slopes is a gold mine for herpetologists, scientists who study amphibians. More than 100 species can be found here. But why are so many of them dying out? Grassland surrounds the volcano's crater. Mark Oliver Rödel and his colleague Marijke Hirschfeld are doing research here for the Museum of Natural History in Berlin. The ponds here are home to several rare species. Frogs are cold-blooded animals, which means they take on the temperature of their surroundings. So they're sensitive to any change in their environment.
No, how is it? Did you find anything?
You got one.
A dead one.
A dead one.
Okay.
I'll keep it.
Their colleague, biologist Nono Gunwowo, has found the body of a clawed frog, a species that's only found on this mountain.
Xenopus amyeti, endemic here in the volcano. Wondering what killed them.
Perhaps it was the pesticides that are used by local farmers, or disease, or an unusual fungus. Rödel and Hirschfeld want to determine the cause of death, so they'll send the frog's remains to a laboratory in Berlin. But first, those remains have to be preserved in alcohol. The bodies of frogs, like those of all amphibians, start to decay soon after death. That's one of the reasons why it's so difficult for scientists to find out what's killing all these different species. Many frogs are nocturnal, so Rödel, Hirschfeld and Gunwowo often work late. They listen carefully. You usually hear a frog long before you see it.
Those are the reed frogs that you hear in the background. They have a very distinctive call. It's loud, almost metallic. They just sit around in the reeds and ponds, so that's where we'll have to go.
Rödel has studied frogs throughout West Africa, and he spent a lot of time in Cameroon. Time is running out for many species, and he wants to collect as much data as possible on those that are still left. Which species are adapting to change in their environment, and which ones are not.
So, Mo, what have you find?
I got one of the Hyperolius. At the deepest point, as usual. Unfortunately, not one of the nicest colorations. Yeah. Frösche sind die genialsten Tiere, die es überhaupt gibt.
Frogs are really the most amazing creatures. They can dig, run, climb. There are frogs that can fly. There are frogs that can lay eggs. The males of some species incubate their young in their throats in a special pouch and carry them around. Other species dig long pathways to take their offspring from ponds that have dried up to new bodies of water. There's pretty much nothing they can't do.
This is a Cassina decorata, a kind of running frog. They are very useful for research because they are sensitive to changes in their environment and they react quickly to those changes.
While Mareike Hirschfeld was working on her doctorate in biology, she spent months in the mountain rainforests of Cameroon. She originally wanted to study baboons, but she changed her mind during an internship with Mark Oliver Rödel. From that point on, she was hooked on frogs. Rödel and Gangoa suspect these frogs may be infected with a poisonous fungus known as Kittredge. It can be deadly for many kinds of amphibians. A number of scientists believe the fungus may have contributed to the recent sharp decline in amphibian populations. Skin swabs will be analyzed later at the lab. The aim is to find out why the fungus has spread so quickly and why only some frogs are vulnerable to it. And there are other threats to the frog's existence here on the mountain. Cattle and horses. The local residents, members of the Fulani people, have been moving their herds into the area to graze. The Fulani consider these animals sacred, so their health and well-being takes priority over that of the amphibians. It takes hours to hike to this spot deep in the tropical rainforest at an elevation of about 2,200 meters. Even in this remote location, the scientists find evidence that cattle have been grazing.
So this whole area is so destroyed by the cattle.
Yeah, a lot of erosion.
So there's no understory left.
The cattle disrupt the frog's environment, tearing up foliage, trampling up and down embankments, and dislodging stones as they search for food and water. And there are other intruders.
Lots of army ants.
Army ants are a major irritant.
Yeah, so we should really be careful even during our night work tonight.
Yes, I really hate them, especially in my clothes.
They're annoying. If we bump into them, they bite us all over. They get into our clothes. Sometimes we have to strip to get rid of them. For the frogs, army ants are a real problem. When they're on the march, no frog is safe.
The concentration of leaves and other material on the forest floor and the density of the canopy above are indicators for the integrity of the environment.
I think I have about 60%, so medium close canopy here in this area.
Rödel and Hirschfeld want to establish if there have been any changes in the local microclimate. Frogs are particularly sensitive to reductions or increases in water temperature or the water's oxygen content.
Which is 18 degrees.
The nighttime search continues. It's been raining, so the paths are slippery and it's easy to stumble. All this in the name of science. Mareike Hirschfeld explains why they do it.
To be honest, sometimes I really have to ask myself, when it's cold and rainy, and you know you're not going to find what you're looking for. But then there are other times when it's absolutely fantastic. There are some great frogs here, and we have a lot of fun trying to find them. That's especially true when you find frogs that are rare, or when you encounter one for the first time. That's really exciting.
But that's not the case tonight. It's unusually quiet.
I think I saw at least 5.
Very little frog activity.
Except for a small tree frog. They're pretty common here. But Rödl and Hirschfeld don't find any rare species. They're concerned that if the environment in this region continues to change, it may encourage the spread of the dangerous Kittredge fungus. The next morning, they're poking around again in the leaves, and they're not finding much. Then they come across a rare variety of screeching frog that's found only here on the mountain.
No, I got one. Big female.
A quick check indicates that the frog is in good shape.
What is he?
Autoleptes periti. And we still have it only from a few sites on this mountain.
Yeah.
So we are going to release it.
Nono Ganwowo is also an expert on frogs. He's been working in this region for years and has noted a sharp decline in the amphibian population. Another exciting find. They thought this species was gone for good.
Oh, Phainobachacus sp. Not found during the last 2 years. Previously very abundant here on Mount Manengouba, but now declining in number in the population.
We came across another rare species, Cardioglossa Menengouba. It's found only here, on this mountain.
It too is an endangered species. Hirschfeld and Rödl are concerned that so many different kinds of frogs are dying out.
We are finding some frogs, but there are a number of species that are turning up less often, or not at all. And that's alarming. We're trying to figure out why that's happening. And there's something else that concerns us. Some of these species are so rare that we may simply have to take some of these Cardioglossa species and breed them ourselves.
This is exactly what they're doing at the Cologne Zoo. They've been able to breed several threatened species here. For example, this poison dart frog from South America. Before Rödl left on his latest trip to Africa, he discussed the breeding option with Thomas Ziegler. The experts here at the zoo have bred frogs that live in a tropical environment similar to that in West Africa. These include harlequin frogs from South America. Their number has been sharply reduced by the Kittredge fungus. Rödl says the fungus is having a similar effect on the amphibian population in Cameroon. But he says he is still undecided about whether rare species should be bred in zoos.
I believe the best way to protect these species is to maintain their native environment. But many species are threatened by factors that have nothing to do with their environment. By disease, for example. In those cases, it makes sense to start breeding them before they die out.
Visitors to the zoo's breeding facility have to have their footwear disinfected to prevent possible contamination. An artificial mountain stream like this one may help save endangered frog species from Cameroon. The Cologne Zoo is part of the amphibian ark. an international network of zoos, aquariums, and specialists that are working to preserve as many species as possible. It is hard to breed frogs in captivity, but the researchers here sometimes get lucky. They were able to breed a species from Madagascar.
Here's an example of a common species we know nothing about.
The staff here recreate rainy conditions on demand. Many frog species require a certain amount of rain at particular points during mating season. The temperature and the food supply also have to be just right. They've also managed to breed this endangered species of South American tree frog. The zoo's experts are especially proud of their work with Vietnamese mossy frogs. The scientists first practiced breeding species that were not endangered. It took a long time for them to perfect their technique. They also relied on data compiled in the field.
In general, amphibians, with their many cutaneous glands, are sensitive to their surroundings. You can make a lot of mistakes. For example, the water can be too acidic or too alkaline, and that can be deadly for the offspring. You have to be familiar with their natural environment and try to recreate that as best you can. And you need a bit of luck as well.
Gretel and Hirschfeld have noticed a number of recent changes in the rainforest environment on Mount Manengouba. On their way back down, they pass by fields used for farming.
Wow. When did they start planting up here?
I've been working here since 2010, and there have been fields up here since then. It's amazing how people will walk for 3 hours from Konsamba to tend their fields.
Unbelievable. This was all rainforest. All that's left now is that patch down there in the valley.
They want to find out how many of the amphibians native to this area have managed to survive all this agricultural development. Everywhere they look, they find various species that have adapted perfectly well to the forest environment. The stream that flows through what's left of this part of the forest hasn't changed, but like the area higher up on the mountainside, there aren't any frogs here either. Gretel has pretty much given up hope that he'll find any. Finally, he comes across a common species in a nook on the bank of the stream. It's small, like most species found in tropical rainforests. The last time Gretel was here, the forest looked much different. Other species of animals that live near the stream are also threatened. Many rare types of chameleons, for example, have been captured by animal traffickers. The scientists have been searching the banks of the stream for hours. Sometimes it's rough going. So far, they have little to show for their efforts.
We haven't found much at all. Just some common species that appear to be doing well here. But there are a lot of species that have just disappeared.
This area, where trees used to grow, is now covered with crops, including cocoa, bananas, and coffee plants.
Much of the forest has been destroyed. There are just a few small patches left. And this increases the effects of climate change on the various species, because a large forested area like we used to have here can mitigate the effects of variation in temperature and humidity much better than a small area can.
But why do some species continue to thrive here despite drastic changes in their environment? After all, frogs have an early warning system when it comes to detecting these changes. They can alert us to danger before they become victims. Climate change and agricultural development have drastically altered the local environment and have also made many species of frogs more vulnerable to infection from the Kittredge fungus. The most important symptom of this fungal infection is a hardening of the skin, which prevents the frogs from breathing and absorbing liquids.
The Kittredge fungus is responsible for an infectious disease that has caused substantial declines in amphibian populations around the world. The fungus likely spreads quickly, probably due to changes in the environment, like the destruction of animal habitats, as we've seen here. This exposes their systems to unusually high levels of stress, so that they simply can't fight off the infection, and it kills them.
The final stage of the search brings Rödel and Nonoganwowo to the Ekomkam waterfall. Here, Rödel hopes to find specimens of another endangered species, the Goliath frog, the largest in the world. This species can measure up to 30 centimeters long and weigh up to 3 kilograms.
Two of the most widely hunted species in Cameroon live in areas like this, the hairy frog and the Goliath frog. Hairy frogs live on smaller rivers. The Goliath frogs are found on the larger rivers, especially during the dry season when water levels are down.
These men are hunting hairy frogs. Some of the animals will be sold to international animal traders. The frogs are worth the equivalent of about €8 apiece. There's a lot of money to be made here. This is the female of the species. Only the males have hair, and then only during breeding season. Many of the local residents believe that eating this species of frog will help married couples increase their fertility. You have to be careful when you're handling these frogs. They're equipped with a set of retractable claws. Rödel wants to find out how big the local catch is and who's buying the frogs.
Are there lots of them here?
Yes.
Really a lot?
Yes.
And do you eat them, or do you sell them to others?
We eat them for the meat.
Do they taste good?
Yes, like fish.
The local women hunt frog tadpoles. They're considered a delicacy. The frog offspring are used in soups, or they're rolled in cornmeal and deep fried. Frog meat is very popular in many parts of Africa, not least because it's an important source of protein. Often it's the only source of protein people have because they can't afford other kinds of meat.
So I would suspect this is a Pereti tadpole, and I'm sure that is a hairy frog tadpole because of the rose.
So, how can scientists convince the local residents that these frogs are an important part of the environment and shouldn't be hunted? Rödel, Hirschfeld and Ganwowo, accompanied by conservationist Martin Itona, visit a village where frog hunting is popular and try to make their case. It's a tough sell, but the visitors do manage to convince a few people. Frog hunting is not only hazardous to the environment, it can also be dangerous for the hunters who have to climb around on slippery rocks in rivers. Some people have been killed during these hunts.
They were rough. When you find if you have frogs inside the stream, some are outside on stones. So when you use this weapon like this, and that stone is slippery, you seriously dive inside the water.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. Oh, today we are going to get a briefing on...
But many of the villagers are skeptical.
Going to the forest, and you find
Martin Etone promises that his organization will supply them with a hog if they stop hunting frogs and trade one source of meat for another. This hog will likely produce offspring later on. Martin offers the piglet to the first villager who agrees to go along with his offer. It's a change for the better.
So this has helped them to improve their livelihoods. Some of them are able to send their children to school. Some of them are able to buy their household needs, and this is helping them. I think they appreciate the project.
You know that Cameroon finds...
And many of them have decided to take advantage of the swap. But when all is said and done, will they really give up hunting frogs? The hogs could come down with some sort of disease, or the villagers might not have the money to buy feed. And then they might be tempted to go back to their old habits.
Do you will ever give up eating frogs?
Very nice meat. Very nice meat.
And so if you compare the meat of a frog and that of a pork, what do you prefer?
I prefer the one of a frog.
Why?
Oh, very interesting and very tasteful, especially when you mix it with dry plantain.
Because we hunt it right up to...
Rodel is quite concerned about a report that he's heard from villagers. Hundreds of dead frogs have been found in the area.
But what happened is that we just went and everything died. Not that...
But I don't know if it is because of this disease or even something else, like you said, poisonous, whatever. We are not yet sure. It needs to be studied, of course.
Scientists like Rodel, Hirschfeld and Ganwowo will continue their efforts to find out why the frogs are dying. But at this point, they can't do anything to stop it. Climate change and the disruptions in the frogs' environment have made them vulnerable to disease, and not just in Africa. It seems as though the decline in the world's frog population will continue.